Zach Laban. I am okay. I am the digital production specialist with West Virginia State University Extension. And yeah, I'm excited to be here, and hopefully, you all can let us know. I don't know if I can't remember if we're going to allow the people to talk or whatever, but if we could kind of gauge everybody's experience level, we might try to cater this presentation thusly. So, thank you.
And hi, everyone. I'm Whitney Stone. I'm an assistant professor of agricultural sciences and natural resources communications at Oregon State University. And typically, I'm working with video with students. And so we don't have a set class for video. So it's usually students wanting to learn about video through independent study. So I'll be possibly able to answer questions or address working with students or beginning teaching video production.
Yeah, so like Zach said, we really want this to be an informal presentation. This is really going to be a 101 on videography. We've all done it professionally for several years. So whether you've done this for a while, we go into some tips and tricks you might not know about, or it'll be a good refresher. Or if you're brand new, there'll be information that lends to that as well. So it's really broken into three parts. We're first going to talk about the planning, the behind the scenes, basically knowing what you want to do before you even start recording. That's really key. Then we're going to talk about filming, editing, and then we'll have a Q&A session at the end. So this is not going to be one of those presentations where we all, sit there and listen. If you want to just sit and listen, that's fine. But we really encourage you to make this like a conversation. If you have a question, just drop it in a chat, unmute, chime in. That's totally fine. And we're actually going to start out if everybody could either drop in the chat or unmute and share what is your experience with videography and video creation. And I don't have access to the chat. Whitney and Zach, if you can.
Yeah, for sure.
Hey, I'm Chris Branham at Oregon State University. I was putting something in the chat, but it turned out to be long, so I'm just going to vocalize it, so it won't take us long. My experience is both obviously shooting video with my smartphone, but then also being on video shoots with professional videographers, not actually pressing the button or setting up the shots, but actually being there while they do that. So that's my experience.
And then we have a few people in the chat. So Melissa says iPhone, iMovie, and some Adobe Premiere, but very limited. Charles Denny, I've been producing videos since OG the Caveman roamed the earth, like in a 40-year range. Only Katrina says only personal and using iMovie. Sonia says use iMovie and mostly on my phone and some with Canon camera. And Lorda says iPhone, Adobe Premiere as well, very basic.
Awesome. Yeah, so it sounds like there's quite a few beginner level people. I work with Charles. He's also from the Institute. I know he has quite a bit of experience, but we are going to go over a lot of the basics of it, how to improve, what are some of the more advanced platforms you can begin to use, and just how to tell your land-grant university story a little better. We're in a world where we're fighting for people's attention, not just online, but in print and in every communication format. So being more intentional with your content really goes a long ways.
All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about planning your video. And so for our pros in the room, this might be just an everyday occurrence. But before you start thinking about like going out into the field, you need to think about what your video needs to look like. So oftentimes we find that some clients don't know what they want. So you're really the ones that are kind of going to be shepherding them through this process in a sense of getting a better understanding. And working with clients can be really difficult, whether your client is in-house within your university, within your land grant extension system. Sometimes you are working with that client relationship. And so oftentimes it helps to ask them for similar projects or videos that speak with them. And that way you can kind of get an idea of maybe interest or just kind of tone or what they're looking for a final product. It might save you a lot of time in the end. And then you, of course, want to identify the purpose. A lot of times your client, if you're working with somebody, might know the purpose, and you, if you're the one shooting, you might know. But it's really good to kind of, lay the groundwork and know, are you educating? Are you informing people and audience? Are you persuading? And then speaking of audience, we need to know who our audience is. So we need to know if it is maybe high school, college students, or if it's more working with people in the community, or just broadly something for social media. It's good to know who your audience or your potential audience would be. And that's going to help with planning what shots and what to include for information. So how to plan. So there are some folks that do not follow a shot list. Some folks like going organically out into the field and shooting things as they see them, based on experience, based what they know they need to get. But oftentimes doing a storyboard or writing a shot list can be helpful for organization, particularly when you're working on a time crunch. We know oftentimes people only have limited amount of time if you're working with interviewing. So you really have to be mindful of that. And then also I find working with a shot list is helpful for novice or students, that with some students think they can just remember everything to get, and it can be so overwhelming going out into the field. So really breaking down what shots they should achieve during that time. You can go on Google Maps and also do some quick research if you're going out in the field, where this is, what you'll be passing, what does the landscape look like, to get a better idea of what you're working with as well, particularly if you haven't been able to go on site, which we'll talk about in a future slide. And then you also need to check with your organization's rules about consent. Oftentimes we need either public, like photo or video release forms if you're working with people and you're going to be publishing. Oftentimes our institution has those, but then sometimes things are out in the public domain, and so you oftentimes might not need that. And then if you're working in the 4-H and community realm, you have to consider working with minors and what that means for consent with adults, their parents, and if they consent, that to be, if you can get that permission. So that could be add more complication before you actually go to shoot. And you could print these out easily and bring pens if you know you're just going to be going out and meeting a group of people. All right, consider what shots to capture. So we have A-roll, which is going to be your main roll of information. So things like interviews, when you're talking with people, testimonials. This is the narrative piece. And then you also have B-roll, which is the additional storytelling shots. So these are looking at a variety of camera angles, such as a wide shot, which is really expanding wide on a landscape, a medium, going close up, panning, moving your camera, which can be side to side or up and down. And then if you are thinking you have some material that you want to capture, like you've already had photography brought in, or somebody that you work with, or you've recently taken photography that you want to include, you can always use photography as your B-roll and kind of do a series like a montage to help with filling up B-roll. But B-roll is really important to help storytell and also to keep interest for your audience, because just watching a person talk on camera is just not going to keep attention as much, and we can tell stories better by including this B-roll. Yeah, the next slide.
Yep. So something I did want to very quickly add, if it's okay. For when I was in the agency world, we were so particular about always having a release. Like I would go to every shoot with a pack of like 30 releases. If your foot was in the background, like you're getting a release, because we wanted to avoid complications. If a client pays us thousands of dollars and then someone says, hey, we're in your video, we don't consent to that, take it down. We have a release that says, you signed it, too bad. Once I started working here with a land grant, we don't use releases at the UT Institute of Ag. I don't know how many of you guys do. If a lot of you do, let us know. for 4-Hers, whenever they sign up for an event, there's always a release. The parents have to sign it because a kid cannot give consent for their video or photo to be used. It has to be signed by a parent. So that's already there. But an anecdote I always like to share is I was at a shoot about a year ago, and there were a couple of kids who I could not film. They did not tell me why. It was some kind of privacy concern, but like these two kids cannot be on camera. I don't know if it was a safety concern or some kind of legal issues going on. But you do need to always be particularly careful when filming 4-Hers, groups of kids. But for adults, I always operate under the assumption if you're at our event on our property or you've agreed to do it through email or phone call, I typically don't do a release, but it is something to consider.
That's a great point. All right. So it looks like some of you all do use photo releases. It looks like there's some great, people are using different editing tools as well. All right, so let's talk about different types of video and what you're going to be tasked with doing, whether for an assignment or a project. But we have short form videos, and we think of these as your less than 5-minute videos. And these are short, concise. They can be on Instagram, like things like Reels, Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube. The aspect ratio is a little different than when we're shooting different like long form videos. It typically is that vertical for Instagram and TikTok, but then horizontally on Facebook. And then oftentimes we use short form videos when you're fighting time and attention. So oftentimes we're just used to being right inundated with information and we have to capture a message quickly. So these are ways to engage the audience. When you think about using short form video, you want to think about tagging popular hashtags, appropriate hashtags, which can get a whole other segment. We got to make sure we're doing the right hashtags. And then trending audio clips. That's a way to really get that kind of organic reach when you are showing kind of, what's going on trend wise and can really get to that virality of your video. And usually short form videos are faster cuts and keep with the audience's attention. All right, and then the next is long form video. So we're going to think of these as longer than 5 minutes. And this might be where you're working with, if you are working with grants, maybe educational tutorials, trainings. There are some benefits to long form. It offers more freedom for content. You have a lot more time to include different aspects if you're covering a topic and educational topics, a variety of interview shots and B-roll. An audience may have no choice but to give attention, such as a mandatory pesticide training. They have to watch this video, so you have them there. Use it to your advantage to storytell and inform the best way possible. And then you often have a longer timeline to complete the project versus a short form video. This, could vary depending on what projects you're working on and who you're working for. But there could be more nuance with the editing and what the final product looks like. Challenges with this, you're going to need a lot of B-roll. And so because this is a longer form, we have to keep the audience entertained and engaged. And then you have to keep the audience's attention for more than 5 minutes, which can be really challenging, even if it's a mandatory video people have to watch. It takes longer to film, so you're out in the field more, you're doing more editing. So it just really takes a lot longer of time and probably takes more time also right on the planning side, the shooting and the editing. So full spectrum of how long it's going to take. And then again, you can use images for your B-roll if you realize, I think some of us have experienced this, you get back into the editing room and you're like, oh my gosh, I thought I had enough B-roll and I still don't have enough B-roll. Go back to those images that maybe you had captured earlier or that you still captured when you were on site when you were filming. So. And then, perfect. And then this is Zach, sorry.
Oh, yes. Sorry, I was deep in the chat field. Yes, before you film, please be sure to check your batteries. I still am guilty of that. I mean, almost daily. It doesn't, it just, it's better to have it and not need it than to, you know, be on a shoot, you get everything ready, and it's just like, oh, guess what? Your battery's at 2%. So yeah, take extra batteries. Just as a general rule, check all of your tripods and your lighting equipment. Another thing that I often, very often forget is the little tripod plate that goes with the tripod, the thing that literally attaches your piece of equipment to the tripod itself. So there's been a time or two where I've had to get creative and gaff tape or find ways to strap a camera to a fixed linear point, so it you know, it's because I forgot the plate. So again, it just, you know, it really behooves you to you know, the night before or the morning of, just check all your stuff, make a checklist. That's something that I'm trying to get better about, and I'm getting better about it as you know, coming into my like 20th year of doing video. So I'm a slow learner, but I get it eventually. And this one is an interesting topic that Tate Whitney and I were talking yesterday, and I don't know if anybody else has experienced this, and if you have, feel free to unmute or write, type something in the chat. But if you're using plastic memory cards for your camera or your recording device, it might be a good idea to replace those every 2 to 3 years, because they can break and wear and tear, and you don't want to, you know, be at the end of a long shoot day or something like that, and go to pull out all of your captured material, and your little memory card just evaporates. So yeah, that's pretty paramount. Checking things before, during, and after you're filming. Of course, it's always a good idea to check the weather and the positioning, depending on what type of shoot specifically you're doing. Uh, there's a billion apps out there that will tell you the position of the sun, and so you can adjust all of your reflectors or your talent, or whatever the case may be. You can work smarter and not harder. And then the last topic, monitor your subject's appearance based on circumstances, especially wind. Avoid sunglasses, hats, excessive jewelry, etc. Yeah, that's just that again. You know, most cases, it's better to go with the thought of less is more. And definitely, if it's possible at all, don't let your subject wear dark sunglasses or hats, because it'll you know, block it'll cause not great shadows, or it'll block the eyes completely. Excessive jewelry, it's just better to be very basic, unless it again, if specifically it's about jewelry or something like that. Of course, you'd want it in there, but whenever people have lots of jewelry or something like that on, the sound, the audio, usually we mic people up, and the little lav mic goes around in this area, and it's always a problem. You know, the jewelry rubbing up against the microphone or anything like that. You just, again, less is more, is my thinking generally whenever I approach these film shoots. And I think that's everything. So nobody said anything, so I'll move
Hey,
on.
Zach, I'll jump in with an
Sure.
experience I had about the memory cards. like now I've learned if I have a road trip and I've got a shoot on Monday and one on Tuesday and another project on Wednesday, I will, even though I've got a card with plenty of space on it, I will shoot each of those on a separate card. And the reason being is that a couple of years ago, I had a card with like 8 projects on it. And somehow that stupid little plastic cover got torn up. And there are actually firms that can extract video from broken memory cards, but it cost a lot of money and it took a lot of time. So learn from my experience, and just if you shoot everything on one separate card. That way, if you did lose that card, you would only lose one project.
Yeah, absolutely. I've thankfully, knock wood, I've never had that problem. But I have had memory cards get corrupted and things like that. But that's really good. That's a very, very good idea. Absolutely. So filming 101. So practice with your camera beforehand, and that goes with just if even if you're filming with your cell phone or a tablet, um, it's it's such a good idea to have it become like second nature. Like you can operate the thing with your eyes closed. So yeah, practice, practice, practice. Um, and then don't be afraid to find videos and resources to learn more about using your camera's features. I mean, yes, absolutely to that. I shudder to think where I would be without YouTube these days. So yeah, it's hop on Google or YouTube, and there's a plethora of good videos and articles and everything that will tell you like tips and tricks, shortcuts or whatever about your specific devices. And this is something that I do religiously, is taking multiple cameras, multiple sound recorders. um, I mean, I tend to be very, very paranoid about audio, especially. So, like I said earlier, like less is more. Also, with this, uh, it's better to have it and not need it. So, if I'm on a shoot and I have to travel, there's like a lot of travel involved, and we only have this for like one day. I will have I'm not kidding. I will have like 4 different sound recording devices and like 2 cameras, because um you have all you have like you can bet your bottom dollar that something somewhere is going to go wrong, and you want to kind of factor in redundancies of like, okay, this recording device, the batteries are dead or something, or I'm having trouble with this other thing. So it's good to have backups for your backups. I can't stress that enough. Again, I know it might seem like overkill, and you're thinking, oh, that just seems like way too much. It's just all this extra. But believe me, you will be thanking your lucky stars whenever I've had everything else fail except for like a cell phone angle that I set up, and that kind of like ended up saving the day, sort of. So again, it's better to have it and not need it than go back to your office or wherever and discover that you don't have any sound, which I have done before. So yeah, please, 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 just take as much as you can. That would be my plea to everyone here.
So to go on a little bit further into filming, so how do you get enough footage? I've been on shoots where I know I'm shooting a 3-minute social media video. That's obviously a whole different ball game than when I've had to do, 30, 45-minute videos advocating for a pesticide grant. That's a whole different ball game. So my rule of thumb is just always shoot more than you need. I take up a lot of file space, and I'm sorry for whoever has to pay for my cloud storage bill. I have a lot of gigabytes of footage because I will always shoot. And if it is a general shot, a neutral shot of, in West Tennessee, we're row crops. If it's of a cornfield, I'm saving it for later. But I believe in shooting what you need while you have the opportunity. Always get more than you need, because truly, when you sit down to edit, especially if it's a social media video that has those fast cuts and you're having to change the shot every few seconds, do the math. You need a lot of shots to fill up that space, especially if it's B-roll. Always think outside the box. I'm one of those people who I'm a one-man team. So if I'm having to think through the interview, the narrative part, the B-roll, making sure they sound okay, making sure the wind hasn't blown their hair, across their face, or I'm having to remember all these details, it can be really easy to get into a routine of left to right pan shot. Oh, look, another left to right pan shot. So think outside the box. We all watch TV, we all watch movies. Pay attention to how they shoot things. I'm telling you, I have been able to gain a lot of really cool shots just by looking at other popular sources for inspiration. Something else to remember is don't turn off your recording immediately. Especially if you're working in the edit bay with transitions, you oftentimes need to have a little extra footage to allow for that transition to happen. So for example, if it's fading out, you don't want it to fade out while they're still talking. So it can be to your advantage to let a few seconds go by at the very end so you have a little room to work with. Charles does a lot of shooting for TV news. And if you've ever watched a TV news segment in the last several decades, they always kind of, a lot of times, will stare at the camera at the end until the live stream cuts off. That's kind of what I'm talking about. Let it go a little further. Also, remember that sometimes the best footage is not planned. It's the spontaneous moments. I've been interviewing subjects, and this sounds a little malicious, and I'm sorry, and they're nervous. They're nervous out of their minds. Maybe they're an expert who's used to spending their time behind a computer and not behind a camera. And I have told them before, no, I'll cut it off. I can edit. And I have on a couple times let it film, because their answer when they think they're not being filmed would be so much better when they think they're talking to the whole world. It might be the same answer, but the way they deliver it can be stronger. Obviously, don't violate their privacy if they ask for it to be turned off, but think through what is the best way to tell this story. And a lot of times it can boil down to recycling B-roll. If I have a generic shot of them applying pesticides out behind where I'm stationed, well, then if I have that footage, I might use it for several videos. It's something that it's a judgment call. You obviously don't want people to be like, oh, well, I've never seen that clip before. Yeah, it's not been used a dozen times this year. But don't be afraid to reuse things, especially if it's months or years old. Like I said, get those diverse shots and angles. Don't do the same shot every single time. A lot of cameras like mine have an autofocus, and it can be a lifesaver for you if you're not having to constantly check and monitor, like, okay, like on an old style of camera I used to use, Blackmagic, it would highlight it in red. It'd give them like little glowing demon eyes if they were in focus. A lot of new cameras will do it automatically. And there's kind of a pro and a con to that, because you have to make sure what you want to be in focus is in focus, and you never want to just always rely on that autofocus. So whether you have a manual, whether you're using an auto, check your focus and double check it, because you can do the best shoot in the world. They can give the best answers and have a great video. But if they're blurry, where it looks like it was shot on a VHS recorder from 40 years ago, what good did you do? And again, back up your footage. The first thing I do when I walk into my office is I am plugging that memory card in. I upload it to my computer desktop and to the cloud, because I had my laptop and computer break about a year ago, and I would have lost everything if it wasn't backed up. It sounds like it's 101, but truly, it'll save your video. And it's always important. A few times a year, I check to make sure it's still auto backing up. Make sure it's doing it. I have mine set to automatic, so I don't have to manually do it. but sometimes that can get turned off. So just make sure there is a way to store your video reliably. If your office burns down tomorrow, will you still have your content? So a lot of times we don't have access to the site that we're going to film. In fact, I would say most of the time we're kind of having to go with the flow. I've had video shoots. Me and Charles have done them by a river, on a river. I've done shoots while riding a horse. I've done shoots in fields, in the woods, a lot of different places. And literally all of that requires improv. So, what are some things you need to be thinking through when you're trying to get that footage, especially the B-roll? You always want to make sure you have enough content to tell the story. And a lot of times, static exterior shots of structures, signs, just a wide shot of the environment can go a very long way to establishing where you are and what you're talking about. Probably the most important is people in action. You know, if you have a bunch of static shots of a building, that's great, but it's so much better if you have people interacting. So, for example, me and Charles had a shoot at a ag center in a small county that had just opened up, and there were all these kids running around doing different like hands-on activities with livestock. Those shots are 1,000 times more compelling than the ribbon cutting shots of the building. 1,000 times more compelling. And sometimes it can be as easy as telling your subject, you know, maybe you're interviewing several different people or there's other people around. Tell them just to talk, you know, film them interacting. You know, you might not even use the audio. There might not even be audio, but shots of people go a long ways. When you're thinking through your B-roll, it's really important to base it off what your subject has talked about. Again, it can be hard if you're shooting a video and you're, you know, a one-man army to be aware of everything. But a lot of times when I'm asking them questions, I already know in general what their answer might be. So I'm already thinking through of what shots. This photo was from a shoot about corn production. And so it was a pretty simple video, but anytime he would say something like talk about grain bins, we talk about fields or pesticide application equipment, I'm thinking I need shots of fields. I need shots of the grain bins, you know, and I make sure and get those B-rolls. Chris, do you have a question? Oh, I believe you're muted.
I do, but if you're going to get to it, then I'll withhold it. Are you going to talk about the actual conducting the interview?
Not really. So go ahead and ask.
Okay.
Yeah.
This leads into editing as well. So a rookie mistake. So for those who you want to, when you're conducting the interview, you don't want to verbally be essentially saying, yeah. This is a rookie mistake that I made, and you learn it in editing. So what you want to do is you basically want to tell your interview subject, this is for the interview, that you will be essentially reacting non-verbally to their answers. So you'll be smiling and you'll sort of be nodding your head, because what you don't want to do is you have they'll be talking. Now, the professional ones in here, you can probably figure out how to remove those ahas and yes, but I don't know how to do that. So you don't want them to be in the middle of a really great answer, and then all of a sudden in the middle you hear this off-camera voice say, yeah. So please please remember to just basically tell them, hey, I'll be listening and reacting non-verbally. And Zach is right, it is very awkward, and people think this is all super awkward. And I basically say, it seems awkward, but it will come out okay. So that's one thing I wanted to mention. And that'll really, when you go to the editing part and somebody's in the middle of a great answer and your voice is in there, then that really hurts the video, because then you can't go back. Well, I guess you could go back and reshoot the interview. But anyway, really important.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. Actually, we don't really go into conducting the interview at all. So just to briefly touch on that, it's typically good practice to, very rarely do you want to have them look at the camera. A lot of times it's becoming common practice. I'll stand like a foot off and they'll look at me. So it's more conversational. They feel a little more relaxed. And to the viewer, they still look like they're kind of looking at them. So you still get that visual engagement with the viewer, but it's not just like an awkward deadpan, like a webcast from the early 2000s. Like it feels more natural while still conveying interest. The example here on the right, like the guy on the right was doing the interviewing. He was like the host of this segment. So they were having a conversation. So that went a long way to making a very natural video that flowed without me having to really, well, without me having to do much of anything, but without having to direct them. It was basically two guys having a conversation about corn, and I just had a camera there. But that's a really good point, Chris. Something to remember is to just always make the most of your subject's time. I do a lot of work with research faculty who have 1,000 things to do in the day. So I always make sure to let them know what we're doing, what is the purpose of this, and most importantly, whether or not they need to use jargon. If someone starts going on about soil-based nematodes and all the fancy control things, I'm like, no, this is going on social media. Take it back a step. And then when I had to do with that same person a grant video, I'm like, you can talk about nematodes all day. I encourage it. Go for it because it's a nematode project. But just always know how to direct them on how they need to address the audience, how they need to come at the subject. And it might not always be easy. If they're used to talking with professionals, they have to remember to step back and talk to a general audience. Sometimes it can be tricky. That's why it's helpful if you want to send them the questions. Even if I don't send them exact questions, I'll send them examples. Hey, we're going to talk about why soil health is important in row crops, what farmers need to know, what the average person needs to know, and at least gets them thinking about what type of answers they need to have planned. It sounds common sense, but be able to set up quickly. This just goes back to knowing your equipment. No one wants to be interviewed by someone who's like, oh gosh, how does this get attached and how does this plug in? And it's something that comes with experience. You know, the more you use your equipment, the more familiar you get, you'll be able to set up, take down really, really fast. Again, sounds common sense, but know what you're trying to accomplish. Ask exactly the questions you need to reach your purpose and don't necessarily take up more of their time just to take up time. You know, if you know you're probably not going to be able to use an answer, don't be afraid to ask a follow-up question to kind of get them to explain it a little more, but also, you know, don't beat people over the head to get an answer. Sometimes it's better to move on. Finally, always ask them to spell their name. Always, always. Even if you think it's a common spelling, there's always that one spelling that you're like, I have never heard anyone spell the name Tom quite like that, or the name Charles. You know, there's always going to be something that makes you go, oh, okay, I'm glad I asked. Ask them to spell their name and state their title, how they want to be addressed.
Is this me? I want to make sure. Yeah. Okay. Just for the sake of time, we're just going to go really fast through some things since this is 45 minutes. So we'll end here in a few minutes and we want to plug what's coming up on ACE and then have time for questions. So we can always revisit for folks that can hang on a little longer. But there's a ton of software out there for editing, free and stuff that you can pay for. So looks like y'all are already using iMovie, which is, you know, helps you set up for Adobe. CapCut is great. DaVinci Resolve has a free version. On social media, as we talked about, faster cutting, lots of B-roll for high energy and excitement. And then for educational purposes, longer spacing between cuts, particularly if you're talking about lots of information. There's some mixed rules or mixed feelings about this probably in our disciplines, but jump cuts are okay, depending on the context and what you're producing. TikTok has made this more acceptable, and we're just seeing a lot of videos done this way. And so that is something that maybe some folks, you know, have different opinions on, but collectively we're seeing more of that. And I'll go to, yeah, perfect.
I was very briefly going to go over basically some of the components of editing software. I don't think we have time. Again, we can go over this at the end. I can walk you through what a Premiere timeline looks like. Obviously, every editing software is a little different, so there's not it's kind of hard to give a universal example. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to go over this. But YouTube is really going to be your friend. Anything you need to know about any mainstream editing software, there's 1,000 tutorials on it. I'm self-taught. It makes it a little more tricky, but most softwares make it pretty simple to do the basics, and then you can build from there.
Yep, and obviously, consider using music in all of your respective pieces. There's a like there's so many free sites out there, but just also be aware that not everything is not everything you can't surprise you can't believe everything you see on the internet. So just be cautious unless you have like a iStock account like I do, where you can have access to stock footage and pictures and music as well. So yeah, that's very important, and that's all I'll touch on with that.
And then Tate, if you want to go, we're just gonna wrap up. We'll just go to the last, like the with questions we have for y'all. If you want any webinar topics, but we just want to be mindful of the 45-minute mark, and we can go back to cover other things. We want to plug our next workshop at the ACE conference. We're going to talk about funding freezes and budget constraints in video production. And this is going to be from 4:30 to 5:15. It's going to be also our annual meeting, which we're going to hopefully decide on election stuff. But we all know we're kind of feeling that crunch. Maybe some funding lines have been frozen. But that's kind of what we're going to cover. And again, want it to be more conversational and educational. But we want to recognize those times and answer any questions while we have it, or we can go back and cover graphics and more about accessibility if anybody wants to stay on a little longer. But any questions we can answer?
I'm gonna go back to my question I started, or that when Zach asked about, because my biggest thing that I'm hoping for is editing, because I don't really I have lots of experience with working with videographers on shoots and also doing video with my phone, but no experience with editing. And so I just downloaded the CapCut app, and is that something? Because essentially what I'm hoping for is literally just putting something in I've heard that this technology is so advanced now that I can just literally put a raw video in and it will essentially create a short video for me. And is that off base, or am I on the right track?
For using for what are you using it for? For like social media, or just for?
Oh no, I'm sorry. It would probably be to basically take footage and turn it into like a 1.5 minute video for YouTube for professional video for OSU extension.
Yeah, I'm sure Tate and Zach they definitely are more, but I love CapCut. I really think it can bring some great templates depending on what you find you might have to edit. But I'm sure Tate and Zach, you've kind of worked with a little bit more of those editing suites and have some kind of advice on that for Chris.
Yeah. Chris, is your question more, I guess, just how do you edit, like an overview of it? I've never used CapCut, so I'm not familiar with it. Is it just?
Yeah, so I literally downloaded the app 2 minutes ago. Although I had heard it before, but you know, it has like I download the app and says, what kinds of videos do you create with CapCut? Well, I haven't created any yet. And it has like meme videos, videos about family, friends, videos about music, celebration videos. Well, none of this really applies. I'm gonna have to pick one. Videos following a trend, maybe, because it sounds like what it wants is it wants to know what style it's gonna add the video towards. And what I'm hoping for is like sort of like the university kind of standard. Here's video, and not, you know, celebration videos. Maybe daily life videos would be probably the closest. I can't tell. Sorry.
I've never worked within templates. I normally just throw it on a timeline and do it from the ground up, which is can be a little chaotic. I mean, just looking at the timeline on my screen, there's a lot going on with these types of softwares. So have you already shot the footage? Or are you planning to shoot it?
I've shot several footage in the past, but yeah, this is something that not one specific thing, but just
Yeah.
several sort of things. Yeah.
Yeah, you can definitely use it like a timeline and just import from your like iPhone, like your camera footage. It's super easy to do like a basic timeline. The templates will just help with like, it kind of repopulates like, okay, they're gonna just go ahead and say 5 seconds, 10 seconds, like, and it just
Mhm.
literally edits it for you because they understand pace, like the templates are pacing it. So yeah. And then last year too, I think it was University, oh gosh, California. Oh gosh, there was a session at ACE about using CapCut and extension, and they were using it in their extension and pretty successful because of that. And there was at the time no TikTok issues, but the free access to it and kind of that mobile
Oh.
editing and being able to get out stuff fast. But yeah, it's definitely
Yeah.
a great place to start, I think, timelines and building videos. And
I did notice when I was downloading the app, it says it's ByteDance. So it's TikTok's company is ByteDance is TikTok's,
Mhm.
what do you call a company?
Mhm.
American company.
Yeah. So yeah. So Kristen, Ricardo from UC A&R did the CapCut.
Yeah, I missed it last year. I was bummed.
But it's just a constant, right? It's a constant familiar, like what works and what doesn't, for sure. And then Ellen asks, how do you gauge whether or not your video is a success? Thinking specifically social media video, do you set an internal goal of the number of views you want?
For us, I mean, there's so many factors that go into it, especially looking at social media, timing, time of day, time of week. Um, sometimes we get the results that we want, sometimes we don't. Sometimes it has nothing to do with the quality of the video. Um, Take, for example, like if I'm doing a pesticide grant video, I know that the purpose of that video is to just go to the people giving the hundreds of thousands of dollars of money to show them what this project is. Therefore, I might evaluate that project's success on, did the video get done and get sent? On social media, there's obviously a more of a numerical likes, comments, shares. I typically don't have a hard and fast objective as much as I look at, was it overall responded well? And it again can really boil down to, when was it posted? Was there something else going on that affected that? Um, Take Charles, for example, he shoots videos for TV news. So he's sending it to these TV outlets. They're showing it, basically broadcasted. So he doesn't have necessarily a numerical measure, but he knows he's getting results. So sometimes you might not have a clear number, and sometimes it might be, I didn't get the results I want. With anything to do with marketing, I think we can all agree you can't do something once and then be able to judge its success off of that. It does take repeated attempts for you to really confidently say, this isn't working. And it's a balancing act. You obviously, video is a pretty big time sink, especially if you're like me, this isn't the only thing you do in a day. You do want to make sure you're using your time wisely. So it's a balancing act between trying to be strategic, but also being willing to change things up based on those results.
Yeah, and I think it's a ROI, right? Like, is it how much
Mhm.
time did it take you? And so, but video is the most like wanted and consumed, like versus still pictures and TikTok and Instagram. So you really still investing your time into video posts and reels is still worth it for the audiences. That's what is popular and what is wanted and what the data shows. So like it's still good that you're focusing on social media videos versus maybe static posts because we see that there's more interest, impact, and possible organic reaches with those videos. So but that's a tough one. Definitely. I'm
I
looking.
know we're about 5 minutes over time. Does anyone else have any more questions? Well, if not, we all hope